Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Shelter for the Damned by Mike Thorn. Narrated by Roman Howell. Suburban Somewhere, 2003. Chapter 1. Mark saw the outline of something etched against the moon, something vaguely house-shaped. He stopped. Adam, whose eyes were cast down under his hood, failed to react in time and thudded into Mark's back. "What the shit, Mark?" He rubbed the corner of his skull that had bonked Mark's sharp shoulder blade and followed his friend's eyeline. "What is that?" Scott, who had been trailing further behind, said, "It's a house." The boys drew nearer. Shadowy details revealed themselves slowly. "It's too small to be a house," Adam said. "It's shaped like a house," Scott said. Adam spat an arc of saliva, shoved his fists into the pockets of his jeans. "More like a shed." Scott shook his head. "It's shaped like a house." "People fucking live in houses," Adam said. "Well, maybe somebody used to live in there." "When?" "I don't know." Adam laughed. "Mark, will you talk some goddamn sense into this fool? I mean, let me just throw this out there. What kind of wussy tucks his t-shirt into his jeans, for Christ's sake? What is this, the 1950s? Adam had hit a familiar sore spot. Not only did Scott's dad force him to tuck in his shirts, he also forced him to iron his shirts, and even his jeans. Mark wouldn't be surprised to learn that he was made to polish his sneakers, too. Scott hissed something nasty between bared teeth and yanked his oversized t-shirt from the waist of his pants. Adam scoffed. Mark had been half listening to his friends, but he said nothing. Adam paced and readjusted his hood. He shot a glance at Scott that said, "Stop being such a baby." Scott flattened his shirt with the palms of his hands, then stood still. He tried to look aloof, but looked scared shitless instead. Mark continued staring at the place. All frayed splinters of wood and flat, desiccated walls. He could almost feel its texture simply by looking at it. "Who the fuck would live in there?" Adam directed the question at no one in particular. It looked impossibly weathered, transformed by age. Mark couldn't help but notice that by some unexplainable stroke of luck or happenstance, it was untouched by late-night prowlers and graffiti artists. It wore no evidence of vandalism, no etchings or street tags. "Nobody lives in there." Mark's response slipped out with all the grace of bad slapstick comedy. It might have been the first thing he'd said all evening. It wasn't difficult to remain silent when he was with Adam and Scott. He allowed Adam to shout his opinions, and he allowed Scott to fervently disagree with said opinions. Adam wiped his bangs out of his eyes. "So we can smoke in there." Mark didn't even take a moment to pause. "Do you have cigarettes?" "Courtesy of my big brother." Scott stepped forward and held out his hands. "Hold on, guys. Come on. We can't smoke in somebody's house. Be smart. They'll call the cops." "Who'll call the cops, Scott?" Adam said. "Think about it." "The people inside the house, that's who." Then, after a pause, he nodded at Adam's Alice Cooper pullover hoodie. "And who the hell wears Rock Band merch anymore?" Adam ignored the weak, belated comeback and gazed heavenward, as if imploring God to knock some sense into his paranoid buddy. "It's not a house, for Christ's sake." "What is it then?" Scott said. "It's a shack," Mark said. Yeah, that seemed right. "A shack?" Scott echoed. "People live in shacks. Come on, let's go somewhere else." "It's dark out here," Adam said, an unlit cigarette wagging from the side of his mouth. "Nobody's going to see us. Besides, it'll be safer in there than it is out here. If somebody sees us smoking out here and makes the right call, my dad will peel my skull like a fucking orange. I'm going in." Scott turned to Mark. "What do you think?" Mark looked hard at the shack. It had the symmetry and structure of any beat-up old building, like a tool shed you might find in some forgotten industrial place, but there was something formless about it. The walls looked sewn together, like an invisible force was holding them upright. He sniffed at the chilly night air. He stared off into the field's surrounding area where boxy houses of privatized comfort were separated by equally distanced lawns. Those houses had people living inside of them. The houses had names and addresses and porch lights and welcome home mats on their doorsteps. By contrast, the shack defied shape. It defied color. It was an assortment of nondescript grays. There was definitely something about it. How had they never seen it before? Mark was sure they had crossed this very field at least once, if not several times, and yet they had never taken notice of it. His brain was blaring with strange excitement. "Go on, take a chance." "I'm going in too," he said, keeping his voice level. He set his eyes on a fissure between the door and the wall. A distant slit, a hair's worth of blackness, a teasing glimpse of inside. Adam nodded, slipped a cigarette to Mark, then held the pack out to Scott. "You coming with us or what?" Scott fixed his eyes on the shack, bobbed uncertainly on his feet. Mark thought he saw him shudder. "Shit, come on, Scott," Adam said. "Don't throw a big fuss over it." Scott yanked a cigarette from the pack. "Fine, let's go already." "Now that's what I'm talking about," Adam said. They approached the shack, clutching smokes inside their fists. Mark reached the door first. As he stepped towards it, something like a gust of heat sighed from inside, breathed into his skin, massaged his muscles, and coiled his bones. Damn, it was getting cold outside. There was no doorknob, nor was there a hole where a doorknob might have been. The entrance was a flush, unbroken surface. Mark eased his fingers into the crack between the door and the wall, and warmth gushed out again, subtler now. He pulled a little, and the door crunched open. "Why don't we try someplace else, guys?" Scott said. Adam jumped on the spot, like a cartoon character having a tantrum. "Fucking give it a rest, Scott, will you?" Scott grabbed Mark's shoulder and restrained Adam with his other arm. "Hold on for 1 second. What if somebody's in there? This is a breaking and entering sort of situation." "Will you, for Christ's sake, look at the place, man?" Adam said. "It's fucking ancient." "Don't yell at me," Scott said. "I'm not yelling. I'm trying to make a for Christ's sake point." "You're yelling your point." Unlike Adam, Scott had something to lose. Scott's parents were diligent, merciless monitors. If he did anything wrong, they'd know within minutes. Somehow, they always did. Adam, on the other hand, faced the daily possibility of getting yelled at or whacked regardless of what he did. "Adam, relax," Mark said. "Scott, listen to me. Nobody could live in this place. Look at the size of it. We're in the middle of the suburbs. Who would live in some shack in the middle of a field? There are nice houses everywhere. Think about it." "Okay, then why is it here?" Scott insisted. Mark quickly discovered that he couldn't muster an answer. "I don't know," he said. "So we can have a place to smoke." Scott didn't return Mark's smirk, but he looked calmer for a moment before a somber expression crossed his face. "What if somebody died in there?" "Nobody died in there," Mark said. "Nobody lived in there." "If somebody died in there, we would know about it by now," Adam said. "Everyone goes crazy over haunted houses and shit like that." Scott tilted his head to the side. "I don't know." "Okay, what don't you know? We've outlined this whole situation pretty clearly," Adam said. "I just don't know if it's a good idea." "For fuck's sake." "Adam, please be quiet," Mark said. "Look, Scott, you want to smoke a cigarette, right?" If nothing else, he could always appeal to Scott's intensifying nicotine cravings. "Sure," Scott said. "Okay," Mark said. "Let's weigh out the pros and cons. If somebody's in there, and I really don't think anybody is, we can just say we had no clue that we weren't allowed inside." Scott opened his mouth to speak, hesitated, then shot his hands into the air, an "I give up" gesture. "Okay, fine. Jesus, you're insistent, the both of you." "Fucking finally," Adam said. "Go to hell," Scott said. Mark entered first. The outside suburban air bled into the shack's interior. It was warmer and drier in the shack, yes, but he felt something much more specific than that, much less physical. There was a transition. Mark paused, allowing it to set in. The walls of the shack looked like they'd been painted with shadows. The windows were coated in grime. The place had 2 levels, the top even darker than the bottom. Tendrils of moonlight snaked through the rot, exposing detail. Everything was made of wood. Everything was gray. It looked as if no one had been in here for decades. The 3 boys' sets of eyes drifted to the staircase. Scott and Adam took a mutually indifferent glance, but Mark's eyes lingered. His gaze crawled up the incline, and he squinted, trying to distinguish forms in the darkness. He took a step forward and craned his neck in an effort to see more detail. Adam's voice broke his focus. "What are you doing?" Mark turned, dazed. A wan smile pulled his lips. He couldn't explain exactly what he felt in that moment. Sort of an ebbing. Like he'd just been caught up in the best film he'd ever seen, and for a few seconds had actually forgotten about the world outside the screen. He stopped replaying recent arguments with Mom and Dad, lost any concerns about his slipping grades, about the often creeping sense that all the authority figures were right, that there was something wrong with him. As soon as he entered, he didn't want to leave. He was not equipped to understand. He only knew that in this strange and intense moment, he wanted to breathe the shack's squalid air forever. Adam approached him and flicked his lighter to life. The flame colored the murk with a marble of orange light. Mark dipped his cigarette, sucking filter and then smoke. The tobacco tasted good, and the nicotine rush was even better. But he wasn't concerned with those things. Right now, nothing mattered but the place itself. The shack. Adam and Scott lit their cigarettes and sat cross-legged on the floor. "Okay, I admit it," Scott said. "This place is kind of interesting. I wonder what it is." Gray smoke trailed from Adam's nostrils. "It's Satan's pad. It's a spaceship. It's a monster's stomach. Who gives a shit? It's a place to enjoy a fucking cigarette." Mark's body came alive, tingling as he approached his friends. He sat beside them, pulling smoke into his throat. "You see," Adam continued, "nobody's jumping out to kill us. No fucking ghosts. No crazy shit." Scott tapped ashes onto the floor. "You wouldn't know if there were ghosts in here." "What are you talking about?" Adam said. "Ghosts are invisible," Scott replied. "How do you know? Have you ever seen one?" "No," Scott said. "They're invisible, idiot." "Fuck off." They sat for hours talking dirty in the rotten gloom. Mark had never taken so long to smoke a cigarette. He half listened, but mostly he just breathed. Mostly he just felt. Chapter 2. "Whoa," Mark said. "What the fuck?" Clinton huffed and gasped. "What the hell did you just say to me?" "Calm the fuck!" Mark was cut off as he ducked and dodged. "Whoa! What'd you say to me?" The scuffle between Mark and Clinton must have started with something Mark had said, or maybe with the gestures he'd made while speaking. A forgotten source, a therapist, a teacher. had once told Mark that 90% of human communication was conveyed through body language. Or maybe it was 78%, or 83%. The undetermined figure might have been delivered to him in last year's mandatory Preparing for Life class, accompanied by a blue and red pie chart. Blue as body language, red as everything else. Red, the words one chooses to use, the volume of one's voice, and other factors, now unknown to Mark. Mark had been standing in the school field with his friends, unseen by lunchtime supervisors, when Clinton shuffled past, huge and forlorn, tugging a piece of beef jerky with his teeth. That was when Mark had said whatever it was that set this chaos into motion. Did it have something to do with the jerky? Probably not, but it was a possibility. Could a remark about a lunchtime snack spark a violent altercation? Mark had seen fights start over less. He had started fights over less. Much, much less. Although he'd spoken only moments ago, he couldn't remember what he'd said any more clearly than he could remember the communicatory percentage assigned to body language. He had spaced out, something he found himself doing more and more often these past few weeks, it seemed, and he'd said just the right thing. Or, depending on one's perspective, just the wrong thing. Clinton stopped and spun, a single rippling motion, and he faced Mark, dropping tattered jerky by his side. Scott and Adam stepped back at once. "You picked your battle, man," Adam said. Clinton's angry blinders went up. Mark had seen this happen many times to many people, and it always meant violence. Hard, fast, thoughtless violence. Mark's palms dampened. His face warmed. Tense shakes vibrated under, through, and over his skin. These feelings were familiar. The physical symptoms of pre-fight preparation. Clinton swung a fist that looked to Mark about the size of a ripe honeydew melon. Mark heard the splitting of air slivers away from his face. He knew right away that he couldn't take this giant kid for long. Clinton was skipping the obligatory hissing and hair-raising and getting right down to face-crushing business. "Come on, guys, back me up," Mark said. "No way," Adam said. Mark turned, an attempt to will Scott and Adam from inaction, but he could only spare a brief and hostile glimpse. Right now, he had to worry about Clinton, who after failing to land his first punch was taking a moment to marinate in rapidly mounting rage. The moment was brief. Clinton burst, a whirling monsoon of flesh. Saliva frothed his lips and cheeks. His wet hair flapped, speckling his forehead with a cocktail of sweat and spit. He sprayed drool and threats and fists that missed for the most part, until, after minutes of frenzied swiping, he finally landed a hit. And it was a motherfucker of a hit. A square of knuckles smashed Mark's chest, sent a tremor rattling through his body. His skull jostled, his jaws clamped, an incisor cut his tongue. Another punch connected with his temple, and he rocked on his feet. His ears sang with the sound of something fractured. Next, Clinton's fist mashed his lips, but he was still standing, breathing in wheezes, mouth swishing with the coppery flavor of blood. He wished like hell that he was in the shack again. He dropped back as Clinton took another arcing swing, then sprawled on the grass, painting his ass green. He scuttled away, but Clinton didn't advance. No, Clinton didn't advance at all. He just hovered over Mark, arms raised. Western stance, reaching for invisible pistols. He looked down, his enormous head eclipsing the sun. Mark would have been terrified, if not for Clinton's expression. Mark watched it happen. Clinton breaking through the surface of rage. A sort of baptism that left the big galoot gasping and humiliated on the other side, and his face wasn't only wet with saliva. No, it was wet with tears, too. Mark had seen lots of guys cry after a fight, but never in the middle of one. Clinton looked at him for a long time, breathing in ragged bursts. "Fuck you," Mark said. Clinton raised a hammy arm, reconsidered, and muttered something half tough before moving away, his head looking somehow loose on his neck, drooping down to stare at his own soaked shirt front. The fight, or one-sided ass-kicking to be more accurate, ended so quickly that Mark couldn't summon a response. He sat up and stared at a random point in space. Disbelief. His heart thudded against a sternum that felt shattered. Scott and Adam finally shuffled up behind him. Scott reached down to help him up, but Mark yanked away. "The hell didn't you guys back me up?" He stood up and spat a red glob. He wiped his hand across his lips, stuck a finger in his mouth to make sure everything was still intact. "Feels like I cut my tongue in half." "You fucking deserved it," Adam said. "For what?" Mark asked. "For making a fucking joke? Have you seen the size of that kid? Man, you started it." "I did what? Made a joke. Everybody makes jokes. Not everybody gets their face split open over it." Truthfully, Mark still couldn't recall whether it had even been a joke that had sparked this particular brawl. Based on his wide-ranging record of fistfights, though, he thought it fair to assume he'd said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Again. Scott cast his eyes down, real contemplative. Mark wanted to slap him upside the head. "His dad just died," Scott said. Mark brushed grass from his knees with scuffed palms. "Whose dad? Clinton's dad? Are you serious?" "Heart attack," Scott said. Mark bobbed on the balls of his feet, shaking off the shakes. "How old was he?" "I don't know," Scott said. "Our parents' age." Mark stopped moving. "Shit, really?" "Yes, really. So watch your mouth," Adam said. "You're stupid sometimes, Mark." Blood leaked out the side of Mark's mouth and scrawled a rivulet down his chin. He watched Clinton slow shuffle across the field. The kid had just finished knocking Mark's brains around, and now he was throwing a one-man pity party. Mark wanted to tell Adam to go fuck himself, and he was a breath away from doing so until he got a good look at Adam's face. Adam looked no more willing to be fucked with than Clinton had looked just a minute ago. Mark was all too familiar with the expression that Adam wore. He had seen it a few times, most of them memorable, in a bad way. He didn't need to reach too far back into his memory to remember where he'd gotten the scar on the back of his shoulder. It had all started with a walk to the corner store near Adam's house on a mission to buy cigarettes. It was the only place they'd found where they could buy smokes, since none of them were even close to passing for 18. The owner of the store, an oil-haired 20-something named Brett, was willing to supply them with the goods on 3 conditions. 1, that they paid a 20% markup. 2, that they waited until nobody else was in the store before making their purchase. And 3, that they told nobody else about the arrangement. Truth be told, Mark resented paying $16 for a pack of cigarettes, but it was a compromise he was grudgingly willing to make. They always took the same route to the store. When they arrived, they would wait if necessary, and then they'd chain-smoke their way back to Adam's place. It was a tradition, both menial and colossal, a routine linked with the freewheeling heat of summer. On one eventful walk to the store, Mark had given in to the urge to start some shit. He'd picked up a dirt-crusted bottle from the side of the road and began tossing it between his hands. He'd noticed Scott's neatly pressed shirt, Sunday school clean, and he'd been unable to resist. He'd shaken the bottle at Scott, spraying some brownish liquid on his collar. Scott frantically wiped it off and told Mark to stop screwing around. Mark laughed and shook the bottle again. Scott got really pissed and, jogging backwards, said, "I mean it! Stop fucking around!" Mark still advanced, a laugh-staggered sprint, holding the bottle like a magnum. Scott stopped and shoved him to the ground, where he lay for a few seconds, still cradling the grimy bottle. Adam and Scott kept walking. Mark watched them. Adam looked indifferent to the situation, but Scott hissed, "I wish you would just learn when not to screw around." Mark looked, no, stared almost pensively at the bottle, smirked for nobody but himself, then threw the thing as hard as he could. If there was anything he'd learned from his countless sports team failures, it was that he couldn't throw for shit. The bottle, unsurprisingly, didn't make it far, but its landing made a statement. It took a few somersaults in the air, then dove inches to the left of Adam and Scott. There was a pop as it connected with the summer-fried pavement. Glass sprayed the sidewalk and clinked all over the road. Scott wheeled around. "Seriously, what the hell is wrong with you?" "Don't shove me," Mark said. A car squeal-stopped by the sidewalk as Mark and Scott advanced on each other. The door opened and slammed shut, an angry adult sound. Mark turned. A middle-aged man, whose youth was melting beneath a too-tight polo shirt, stomped toward them, his teeth clenched, his sunglasses glinting. His comb-over bobbed as he moved. "Okay, who's the smartass?" the man said. Adam, who'd maintained his cool throughout the ordeal, pointed at Mark. The man said nothing before marching toward Mark with drill sergeant intensity. He pinched his sunglasses with both hands and yanked them off, playing Clint Eastwood, playing angry daddy, playing God. "You want to pop someone's tires, you little shit?" the man asked. "You want to cause an accident, huh? Think you're funny?" Mark heard a strain in the man's tone. This guy wasn't Mark's dad or Adam's dad. No, this guy had next to no potential for active violence in his blood. He wasn't the tough guy he believed himself to be. This was not his genuine state. He was a jaded suburbanite company man, Mark decided, who was reenacting one of many scenes from Channel 45's eternally looping Cop Cinema Classics marathon. "I didn't mean to throw it," Mark said. A thin, facetious smile wormed through his composure. This could get interesting. Although this guy might have only perceived himself as a man among hard-nosed men, he was also the kind of angry that causes lawsuits. "You accidentally threw a bottle right in front of my car?" the man asked. Mark maintained eye contact. That was the thing with these kinds of dogs. You had to know when to recognize and when to acknowledge, but you also had to know when to dispense with the bait. "I threw it on the sidewalk," Mark said. "But you still threw it, wise ass! It flew out of my hands." There was a period of silence, the temporal equivalent of 2 consecutive sneezes. The man looked at the boys and twisted his sunglasses between thumb and forefinger. His eyes narrowed into "don't fuck with me" slits. Tom Selleck meets Tom Cruise, the badass of the burbs. "I'm gonna remember all 3 of you," he said. "Don't come around here again or I'll call the cops. Especially you, tough guy. Hear me, you little shit?" Mark sustained his stare. Action hero speed-walked back to his car. He dropped in, slammed the door, and peeled off, leaving a Firestone smudge on the road. Real cinematic. Mark turned to Adam. "What's your problem? Scott starts shit and you rat me out? Fuck you, Adam." Adam had appeared completely aloof until this moment. Now the look he fixed on Mark seemed almost like an impersonation of their comb-over crusader. In fact, Mark probably would have laughed if Adam hadn't looked so downright authentically, unmistakably furious. He shoved Mark. Mark lost his footing, but quickly jumped back up. "What's your problem?" Adam gave him another shove, more forceful this time. Wind whooshed from Mark's lungs as he thudded against a fence. A wood splinter sliced his shoulder. Adam lunged, forearm outstretched, and restrained him against it. The splinter cut deeper, pain like a drawn-out paper cut. "I know who that guy is," Adam said. "He plays cards with my dad sometimes. If he comes to my fucking house, I'm not gonna take shit for this." Mark tried to move away from the fence, away from the puncturing strip of wood, but Adam continued pressing. The splinter pierced and split Mark's skin, drawing blood. Adam pushed more forcefully. The splinter probed deeper into Mark's flesh, and he couldn't help but shout in shock at the white-hot pain. "Christ, Adam, let go of me!" Adam drew his forearm away, hesitant, deliberate, and Mark swore quietly. He dabbed his bleeding shoulder, and not knowing what else to say, grumbled. "He obviously didn't recognize you." That's not the fucking point, Adam said. What is the point then? No answer.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?